Wagwan. Good morning, good night, welcome back. And if you're listening for the first time, I'm your host, Melanie Byfield, saying welcome to episode 23 of The Real Situation, where we give you a taste of Jamaican politics. We're still in joint select committee mode, where review of the Constitution Amendment Republic Bill 2024, which is being proposed to reform the Constitution, is continuing. There have been 10 meetings so far. The first was January 15. The opposition leader read a statement confirming there would be no further participation until 4 questions were answered by the Prime Minister. One of those questions relates to the government's position on moving Jamaica's final court from the Privy Council in London to the Caribbean Court of Justice. The next meeting was on January 22, which was a presentation on the bill, giving an overview of the main clauses that was going to be reviewed by the committee, which was Jamaicanization of the Constitution, the office of the President, expansion of the Senate, modification of the alteration provision, which is Section 49, enhancement to citizenship provision, the qualification and disqualification of membership in Parliament, and incorporation of the Electoral Commission of Jamaica. The next meeting focused on there was a presentation on the parliamentary cabinet system, which is Jamaica's system of government. Then the next meeting was a presentation on citizenship. That parliamentary cabinet system meeting was the 29th. Of January. February 6 was the presentation regarding citizenship. February 19 was a presentation by the Ministry of National Security, and it addressed the subject of citizenship in the Commonwealth. February 26 and March 12's meetings dealt with the topic of the office of the President. March 19, that meeting dealt with Parliament and expansion of the Senate. And then March 26 and April 2 address submissions made by the public. So the Joint Select Committee meetings are continuing, but let's check out the real situation, right? There's talk of whether a night needs to happen because constitutional reform coming like it dead, or whether it can in fact be resuscitated. On April 27, Professor Rosalie Hamilton authored an article, right? And it was published in the Gleaner, entitled Constitutional Reform is Dead. Or is it? And that's what we're going to focus on in this episode. So I'm going to be reading that article. I'll let you know when, other commentary comes in, but we're going to start out reading the article. So on April 14, Nationwide reported that Prime Minister Dr. Andrew Holness has accepted that the goal of transforming Jamaica into a republic at this time has been dashed. The Prime Minister places the blame of the failure squarely at the feet of opposition leader Mark Golding. So let's just talk about that. Now, remember, the role of the official opposition is to question and scrutinise the work of the government, right? And 4 questions were posed by the opposition leader at that first Joint Select Committee meeting, which he did ask to be recorded in Hansard, which is the official record of parliamentary debates. So here are the 4 questions. Number 1, are the people of Jamaica not entitled to be told why the Caribbean Court of Justice bills that were tabled 10 years ago have not been tabled again? Question number 2, the history of the reform process has birthed a certain distrust factor. Would not the government wish for that to be put behind us before proceeding on this historic process? Number 3, is the government not under a duty to explain why they're proceeding in a piecemeal fashion instead of taking this opportunity to ensure that the majority of Jamaican people enjoy access to justice to their highest court? The Caribbean Court of Justice is a globally respected institution of internationally acclaimed excellence. And question number 4, would the people and we ourselves not regard it as a welcome sign of maturity and wisdom to witness an agreement between the parties on the settled way forward for success on these new arrangements, regardless of who wins the upcoming election? And is this not an appropriate juncture for this to be accomplished? The leader of the opposition went on to say, the government is leading Jamaica into a situation where Jamaicans have to obtain a visa and millions of dollars to enjoy entry into their highest court, the same court of the abandoned British monarch, which is backward, self-doubting, and an undesirable state of affairs. This lack of self-respect and shamelessness as a people is rejected by the opposition. There are other serious concerns with some of the contents of the bill, but the question of access to justice in the interest of Jamaican people must be addressed first. Therefore, as from the adjournment of this meeting, we request being excused from further participation in this committee, pending the answers to those questions being given to the public by the Prime Minister. Right? That was the leader of the opposition talking. And to date, those answers haven't been provided. So I would be interested to know what you think about that statement. The Prime Minister places the blame of the failure squarely at the feet of the opposition leader. All right, let's go back to the article. So does this mean that Constitutional Amendment Republic Bill 2024 to create a republic that was tabled in Parliament on December 10, 2024 is now officially dead? It appears so. In the eyes of many Jamaicans, it was dead on arrival because of inadequate public education and engagement about the Constitution and the reform process. Both the process and elements of the bill were inherently flawed. Blaming the opposition leader just basically makes these flaws unclear, right? I just changed that a little bit at the end. The article goes on to say, now talk about the flawed process. In 2022, the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs was established to spearhead the most meaningful and comprehensive post-independence constitutional reform work to be undertaken in Jamaica, among other things. This development was significant and far-reaching. Many Jamaicans were excited to see the end of the British monarch as head of state. Even more exciting was the prospect of the Jamaican people actively shaping a new constitution. Recognizing the significance of this development, civil society organizations, including the Advocates Network, that's what Professor Hamilton belongs to, advocated for, as well as organized public education and engagement on constitutional reform. But by March 1, 2023, when the Constitutional Reform Committee was announced, the flaws became obvious. Controversy started about the composition of the Constitutional Reform Committee, the absence of transparency, and public education engagement, and more. The controversy escalated after widespread criticism of Minister Malahoo Fort's announcement that the Constitutional Reform Committee had reached a consensus between the two main political parties on April 17, 2023, without adequate dialogue with the Jamaican people. By the time the bill was tabled in December 2024, most Jamaicans were excluded from the process. Between 2023 and 2024, the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs reported that 12,000 Jamaicans were engaged in the process through stakeholder consultations, community engagements, and a series of town hall meetings in 6 parishes. This is grossly inadequate. The flaw is rooted in a top-down government-centric constitutional reform process led by a cabinet minister rather than a people-centric reform process where the design, discussions, and decisions are rooted in the participation, priorities, and perspectives of the Jamaican people. It was an act of government, not the act of a people constituting a government. The process ignored the core principle in a republic, that a constitution originates from the authority and will of the people, not the government. Government's legitimacy is derived from the authority of its people and ought to operate under a constitution created by them. The idea that the authority of government comes from the consent of the governed, as noted on the MLCA website, and not individuals in government or political parties, lies at the heart of this flawed process. So let's just go back and emphasize a couple of terms, because the controversy about the composition of the Constitutional Reform Committee was that there were 15 members, right? 8 of them are politicians, 7 of them are lawyers, and 1 of them is not even Jamaican. And then on top of all of that, you have the chairperson, who is a government minister. Those were the criticisms about the composition of the Constitutional Reform Committee. Now, regarding the absence of transparency, none of the Constitutional Reform Committee meetings were public, and no information was given regarding how they were selected. They actually had, if you bear with me for a second, they had Williep. Their meetings started on March 2022 and went all the way through to November 13, actually. I have as their last meeting. So they had a lot of meetings, and none of them were public. So concerning public education and engagement, that was a big criticism, right? Recently, the Silborn Sidial show, on his Instagram, he gave some information about the presentation made by Ms. Malahoo Fort at the UK High Commission. Was a presentation given to the diaspora, where she basically asserted that this whole situation is stalled because the opposition want their way. But after hearing her presentation, one lady mentioned how she still wasn't any closer to an answer, and then you still have that reoccurring question of how many town hall meetings have taken place in each of the 14 parishes. Now, that's a question we can answer, right? So there were 6 town hall meetings that took place, bearing in mind that there are 14 parishes in Jamaica, right? So on April 26, 2023, the first town hall meeting was held in St. James, Mobay. May 17, 2023, a town hall was held in Mandeville, I believe, in Manchester. June 28, 2023, a town hall meeting was held in Port Antonio, Portland. July 26, 2023, another town hall was held in Santa Cruz, St. Elizabeth. July 27, 2023, a town hall was held in Savlamar, Westmoreland. Now, here I'm going to interject because, and say something. Now, that last meeting was July 27, 2023, right? May 2024, the CRC report was concluded. So 5 town hall meetings had taken place. Then the CRC report was issued. There was one more town hall meeting after that, which was in Kingston, believe it or not, the capital city. And that was on July 25, 2024, after the CRC report was submitted. Now, which parishes haven't had meetings so far? St. Andrew, St. Catherine, Clarendon, Hanover, Trelawney, St. Anne, St. Mary, and St. Thomas. And all of those other parishes, there's only been one town hall meeting in those parishes. So what else has been going on with public engagement? There's approximately 180 high schools in Jamaica. A Road to Republic school tour was commenced and undertaken at the high schools. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, blah, blah, blah. About 13 of those have taken place so far. And 7 of them were held nope, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them were held before the CRC report was concluded. After the report was concluded in May, another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 engagements took place at high schools in Jamaica. So what were other people doing? University, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 engagements at various universities. Northern Caribbean, the CMU, Portmore Community College, Sam Sharp Teachers College. That was actually undertaken by Sir J. Boswell, the youth advisor on the committee. UTEC and Northern Caribbean. More recently, there's been a town hopping, right, that's been taking place, where my understanding is that a member of the MLCA or the CRC will go and speak to people in these towns about the constitutional reform process. So far that's happened in Clarendon, Mandeville, Halfway Tree, Portmore Mall, Mandeville again. All of this happened after the CRC repeat was concluded. And there's no real, I don't know the ins and outs of what, the engagements are, but it's on the Road to Republic Instagram. There have been virtual discussions that have taken place. The Caribbean in an era of decolonial constitutionalism, lessons and thoughts. That was something that was a virtual discussion with Marlene Malahou-Fort, Lloyd Barnett, and 2 members of IDEA. There was a webinar, 3 webinars actually, July 8, July 10, 2 on July 10, a report on the transition to the Republic. Civil society undertook some public engagements. There was the Africa Forum, where Marlene Malahou-Fort was a guest, which was an amazing discussion, I will say. We talked about that before. They held discussions at the Church of God in Christ in Duany Pen, St. Thomas, twice. Jamaicans for Justice held a town hall series in May after the report was concluded. Before the report was concluded, Our Jamaican Republic, a youth debate, Change or Continuity for Jamaica, was held in November 2023. The Caribbean Christian Leadership Network held an engagement, constitutional reform, the possibilities and pitfalls. That was Mr. Justice David Batts and Lalita Davis Mattis, excuse me, and Reverend Dr. David Henry, back in August 2023. Advocates Network, Afiwi Republic. That was an engagement held in May 2023, and Constitutional Reform, The Road Ahead, Jamaica Accountability Meter Portal, JAMP, held an engagement, excuse me, in February 2023. UE has also held some debates. There was a debate on public law. There was the sixth public law debate on the Republic President more recently. There was a reasoning with Bruce Golding and a reasoning with PJ Patterson. They actually had a reasoning about the Caribbean Court of Justice, and there was the fifth public law debate on constitutional reform that took place back. That was a review of the Kuju draft of a constitution that his organization had prepared. And then in the diaspora, you have the recent UK High Commission presentation, and then before the report was concluded, you had What the Diaspora is Saying, that was hosted by online by Ambassador Curtis Ward. Jamaican Londoners discussing the Republic transition. These next three actually were hosted by Silborn Sidiel. The Jamaican Londoners discussing Republic transition, what will happen if Jamaica becomes a republic, and Jamaican youth's views on Republic. So, but, again, going back to the town hall meetings in each parish, obviously that's problematic. And the public engagement over a 2-year period, as it has been very heavily criticised as being very insufficient. Now, I am going to briefly go to just a reminder of what we heard Danielle Archer say, right? Danielle Archer of National Integrity Action. She basically said, when she was asked what she would do if she were the Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, right? She said, before I would make a decision about going to phase 1, 2, 3, or 4, or whether it's going to be on a phased basis, I would want to have a public education campaign amongst all Jamaicans so that they understand what the current law is, what the current constitution is, and also take into consideration what the main concerns are. Once that assessment is done, she would create a feedback loop, some kind of mechanism coming from different counties and parishes, as well as the different stakeholder groups, not just lawyers or doctors, but farmers, teachers, persons who are domestic workers. I would want to have those sectors decide who they want their leaders to be on this panel or grouping. She went on to say that what the Constitution is also doing is giving us an understanding of how we want to operate as a society. So it would demand of me such an extensive public education campaign that I would have to twin it as well with a civics education, so that when I speak, people understand when I'm asking them about a president, what it means to have a prime minister, what it means to have a different kind of president, an executive president, what the functions are. It wouldn't just be for me or the political directorate, because as legal and constitutional minister, I appreciate that what I'm doing now is simply guiding a team towards making a decision for a generation 50 years from now. So that is what I would have in my mindset. It's not about politics. It's not about being the first president of the Republic. It's not about being the first person to craft the modern constitution. It would be about how I can create a society that is so far different and highlights the best qualities of Jamaica, that it gives us the best possible way to succeed. I wouldn't just be focusing on what other constitutions have done and said. I would be focused on making a constitution that is curated to the culture of Jamaica, the expectations of the people, and also solve the problem of apathy and lack of interest in national affairs. So let's go back to this article by Professor Hamilton. The next heading is Retaining the Status Quo. The bill is fatally flawed because of the Cabinet's decision to retain the parliamentary cabinet system of government without altering its original design. In doing so, it simply perpetuates the status quo of unfettered executive dominance, which was glaringly evident in the constitutional reform process. The bill retains the concentration of Prime Minister/Cabinet power without an adequate oversight mechanism. It also strengthens the power of the Prime Minister and perpetuates executive dominance of the legislature. In doing so, it perpetuates authoritarian leadership that weakens our democracy and our economic potential. Further, by focusing mainly on removing the British monarch as head of state, the bill is devoid of provisions to give real meaning to the central idea of people sovereignty in establishing a republic. Effective mechanisms to empower communities and to ensure that people have a say in the decisions that impact their lives are absent. And so let me address that quickly. Yes, that brings in the criticisms that were made for some things that were not included in the bill, right? The impeachment provision for members of parliament, for accountability, the recall of MPs so that there is some accountability at the local level, a right to petition, among other things, including like the system of government, executive versus non-executive president, the election of senators. There was a lot of things that was being raised in the public domain that weren't in the bill. Back to the article. Also, by retaining the UK Privy Council as Jamaica's final court of appeal, the bill preserves a colonial relic and undermines our pursuit of self-determination. So let me comment on this briefly. The CARICOM Heads of Government meeting is going to be held in Jamaica from July 6 to July 8. And it's expected at that time that the new president of the Caribbean Court of Justice, whose name is Justice Winston Anderson, who is a Jamaican, he'll be sworn in on July 6. So there'll be a situation where the Governor General, the representative of the King, will be swearing in the new CCJ president, a Jamaican, in Jamaica, when Jamaica, in its bid to become a republic, will not be transitioning from the UK Privy Council to the Caribbean Court of Justice as its final court of appeal. Back to the article. In a world in the throes of seismic geopolitical and economic changes, the bill's focus on removing the British monarch and retention of the status quo is not enough. It cannot help young Jamaicans to forge a new self-reliant path to improve their well-being in the future. We need a constitution that enables participatory governance and empowers individuals and communities to find innovative solutions to the challenges we confront. We need all hands on board, not just the ruling elite. To comment on that, remember that the 1962 Constitution wasn't made for the people of Jamaica. It was made by the British for the Jamaican elite. Hence the reference to a constitution of the people, by the people, and for the people being required this time around. So, is the process really dead? Back to the article. Is the process really dead? For me, and I'm still reading the article, not me. Right? That's Professor Hamilton. For me, the apparent death of the bill is fundamentally the result of the flawed constitutional reform process and flawed elements of the bill. So if the bill is effectively dead, does it mean that the constitutional reform process to establish a Jamaican republic is now dead? I say no. Not if the people of Jamaica want constitutional reform and are willing to actively engage in a process of dialogue, information sharing, learning and advocacy as the actions of a people constituting a government. This is what is required to create a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Considering the flaws as well as the budget allocation to the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs of 3.2 billion Jamaican dollars from 2022 to 2025, we cannot allow this process to die. The process produced not just flaws that we can learn from, but also important provisions and other benefits on which we can build. We can build on provisions to Jamaicanize our constitution and abolish the British monarch as head of state, as well as insights from the 2024 CRC final report and other documents on the MLCA website. People can do their own research, organise meetings in their social networks, join the dialogue being held by churches, community groups and others to keep the constitutional reform process alive. The government's goal of meaningful and comprehensive constitutional reform can still be achieved if we get active, work together, and learn some key lessons. A major lesson is the need to turn top-down governance on its head and create effective participatory mechanisms for our voices to be heard, both during the process of constitutional reform and in the provisions of a new constitution. We must continue the process as owners of the constitution, not as passive observers or critics. Let's organise, collaborate, and forge consensus to amplify our voices and demand the constitutional reform we want and deserve. After the upcoming election, let's encourage the next administration to wheel and come again. Constitutional reform is not dead if we, the people, refuse to let it die. I am going to leave you with a speech by Lawrence Wong, and not the entire speech, just I'll pick out little parts, but the speech is made by Lawrence Wong, who's the Prime Minister of Singapore, and this is part of a speech he gave in Parliament. We are entering a changed world. The only way Singapore can make it through the gandering storm is to stay united, pool our resources, our resilience, and our resolve. The government will do everything we can to steer Singapore through the choppy waters and make sure no one is left behind. Above all, we will put the interest of Singapore and Singaporeans at the centre of everything we do. The road ahead will be harder, but the dangers are real. The road ahead will be harder. The dangers are real, but so too is our determination. Our little red dot will continue to shine. In a dark and troubled world, Singapore will hold our ground as a beacon of stability, purpose, and hope. Puss and dog can get together, right? Why shouldn't the little red dot be the black, gold, and green? Bruce Golding said, if Michael Manley and Edward Seaga in 1979 could set aside their political differences and agree on the establishment of the Electoral Advisory Committee, now the Electoral Commission of Jamaica, and how it was to be constituted, this can't be too much to ask of their successors. I hope you're continuing to enjoy this journey, that you're finding it educational and useful. I'm not sure when the next Joint Select Committee meeting is. I don't have a date, but they're not done yet. So our travels on the road to Jamaica becoming a republic will continue, right? As I've said before, this road can't be patched. It needs to be totally torn up and laid down properly with drainage and all of them thing there. It needs to last a long, 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 long time. And I'm still confident this process isn't dead. And this journey will end with a truly independent and sovereign, totally decolonized Jamaica, land we love. You can find this podcast on YouTube, Buzzsprout, Spotify, Podcast Index, Deezer, Podcast Addict, Apple, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music. If you want to reason about anything, or if you can't find any of the material that I was talking about, you can email me on atasteofja@outlook.com. So until the next time, thank you for supporting this podcast. I really appreciate it. Please subscribe, follow, and share it with friends, and like up the thing. And again, I thank you for taking the time to listen. One love. Yes, the word is love.